Shine down at the Target Center. Experience an electrifying night of powerful performances and chart-topping hits on the Dance Kid Dance Tour July 28th with special guests Bush and Morgan Wade. Get your tickets now to be a part of an unforgettable concert experience. All the details, KFAN.com, keyword talent.
Andy Luger is our in-studio guest for the last half hour, the 3 o'clock, and early here in the 4 as well. I'm assuming on Feeding Our Future, you can only be very general for all the obvious reasons. Can you... I'll try the questions, and then this is not your first rodeo. You'll know what to do, how far you can go. But generally speaking, when this thing crosses your desk, are you bleeping kidding me? And what was the reaction, and how did it cross your desk?
So 2 days before I was supposed to get confirmed, people in the office called me, hey, when are you coming? This was January 2022. I was supposed to get confirmed then. And there was a fight in the Senate, and it got delayed 2 whole months. So I literally sat, in my pajamas watching C-SPAN 2, which I recommend to everybody.
It's a fine network.
To see when, what day I would get confirmed. But a couple of days before I was supposed to get confirmed, I get a call from people in the office. When are you coming? I'm like, why? Okay. I know you love me, but why? And well, something's happening, and, keep your eye on the news. So I think it was a Thursday when the searches were done, and they were, public. The search warrant applications were public. And I figured out I need to read these search warrant applications. This is going to be something I'm going to have to deal with. I mean, it's on the news. It's clearly a big deal. And then I downloaded the search warrant applications and read those as though I was sitting at my desk as U.S. attorney. And it was clear this was just a monster. And so I had, because of the delay in the Senate, which I'm more than happy to talk about for an hour or two, I had time to study it and think about it. And on my first day, I gathered the very, very, very small team of people working on it, mostly one person, Joe Thompson, who is the lead prosecutor on the case. And I said, I want to know everything I can about this. Let's put together a full briefing, and then let's build a team, because Joe is fantastic, one of the best prosecutors I've ever seen, but he's one guy. And, a couple of agents and a forensic accountant, and we need a lot more. So we built a team around that case. They had their own room. I'm big on giving people a room, a big conference room.
Literally and figuratively.
Yes. And put everybody in a room and tell them, like you give them a coffee and you give them a microwave and say, come out in a few months when you're ready. And you take out the garbage every once in a while. So they work around the clock. We built a terrific team, and they start preparing indictments. And we agreed, I wanted it to be as big as possible, because I wanted to send a very clear message that we're not tolerating this.
How gobsmacked, you say it was a monster, how gobsmacked were you as that awareness came to you, right? We're talking, I haven't seen, if the numbers keep changing, 250 million, right? I don't know if it's going to end up being higher than that.
Yeah. It gobsmacked is, so that's your word. That's lovely. It's
one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's good. I'd seen massive frauds before. When I was a junior prosecutor, I prosecuted a $750 million fraud with other people. I was a kid, so I was learning. We prosecuted over 100 people for that. This was, the term brazen was the one that came to my mind when I guess I got gobsmacked. I came up with the word brazen, and that's what I lived with.
Yep.
It's so incredible how they just went out and submitted these reimbursement forms for kids who didn't exist, for meals that weren't served, for names they were making up. And we just all looked at each other and said, we got to do as much as we can. We ended up indicting 70 people. Could we have indicted more if I had another 10 prosecutors and FBI agents, and that was what we were going to do? Sure. But that made a very clear statement. And we had terrific people working on the case, both from FBI, Postal, IRS, elsewhere, as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office. And, the sort of unsung heroes, I said, to some extent, are those who do the asset forfeitures, who go out and find the houses and the boats and the cars and seize them. So we got back, I think, close to or around $50 million worth of property. So everybody dug in. You know, we talk about the violent crime that we worked on and how we kind of reorganized the whole office, including the people working on Feeding Our Future. We're indicting violent crime cases. But we had to do both and other things that we don't really talk about that much.
Did you find it very persuasive? The comeback from various places within the state was when they were under siege about not finding this was, well, we were basically, and at least I believe there was one situation which a judge said, you got to keep dispensing this money. So what are we supposed to do? Is that very persuasive to you?
So no, the judge didn't really say that. A lot of this there's a lot of noise around this. What was frustrating, I think, to the people who kind of figured out what was going on was getting accused of being a racist. And you rate not by state employees, but by the Feeding Our Future sort of legal machine that got together. And you saw that when we did the bribery case, you know, they had a list of arguments that the juror was supposed to use in the jury box to get people to acquit. And the main one was, this is a racist prosecution. They're only going after us because of our color and our immigrant, you know, and then we're Somali. That pushed back hard, and you're going to hear about this at the trial, I think, is that was an attack mode. And when anybody who's committing a crime and a fraud, and I've had it happen to me personally when I investigated a large fraud, a nationwide fraud, and all of a sudden you're being attacked, you know, you're out to get them. One, that's when you know you're really on the right track, because people who are doing the right thing and are honest and you're mistaking them for fraud, they don't attack you. They show you and they persuade you. So that was the downside here, is that they went on the attack. And if you're a lifelong state employee trying to do the right thing and bringing things to people's attention, and the next thing you know, you're in a deposition being under oath, being told you're a racist, that's not going to advance the cause. And I've said this to various people who want to know how to do this better.
So we've got, obviously, the Feeding Our Future case. We've got apparently bonus checks that were intended for frontline workers during the pandemic that we're learning ends up, and in many cases, ended up in the wrong hands. I think there's also been questions about childcare and a childcare assistance program. And so the overarching theme is, do we have a problem in this state when it comes to, you know, look, there's always going to be fraud. You can tell me, you can, I'm sure, testify to that better and would know much better than me. But it does appear as if we're not exactly on we're on a roll in the wrong way. And does that say something about the mechanisms of government here being asleep, not being vigilant enough in the name of, we got to get this money out?
So I've been asked that question by people in government. My answer is, here are some ways to improve. Learn from this problem. Feeding Our Future, you could say, is somewhat isolated because it occurred during the pandemic and all of the problems that came with that. But let's learn from it. And so if somebody goes from 0 to 60 overnight in any program, you know, and the autism one is the next one that went public.
Right.
So if somebody is all of a sudden, you know, billing hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, for autism treatment, and the day before they were working at McDonald's, why shouldn't we look into that? Why isn't that a problem? And let's have the mechanisms in place to catch those metrics when they happen. Doesn't mean that everybody's engaged in fraud, but let's be better about asking those questions early on. And I think the legislature, the governor's office, the BCA, everybody's talking about the best ways to do that. So the conversation has gotten started. I'm glad about that. I'd rather focus on the solution than on what caused all of this going back, because I'm not big on the blame game. I'm more practical. How do you get this fixed?
How did you respond? What was your first reaction to the notion that a juror was going to be presented with a big bag of cash?
So I learned about it. It happened on a Sunday night. Monday was the last day of trial, last summary arguments, closing arguments. And I was, so to just set the stage, I work out in the morning with a trainer at 6 o'clock. Right before we're about to start.
So LeBron James does too. Same one, same trainer?
He follows me a lot. What can I tell you? So we've been doing this for years. We used to do it live. Now we do it by FaceTime. And so we're about to click on the FaceTime, and I get a call from the FBI saying, this happened last night. And, put in place a whole series of steps, including, alerting the bench and alerting defense and what's going to happen that morning in court. And I, after that call, then my trainer clicks on, and I've got it's now like 15 of these and 12 of those. My mind was in a different place because I'm starting to think about the one case that we prosecuted when I was in Brooklyn. Again, not me, but the organized crime folks. And I remember the day that one of my friends walked by me in the hall with a big grin on his face, and I said, "What?" He said, "We're indicting the juror in the Gotti case." And we got him. And I forget, I think it was $65,000. I forget the exact amount, $45,000, $55,000. And I quickly pieced together that whole story and what happened. Reached out to a couple of people who were organized crime prosecutors to see is anybody in the country looking at a juror bribery case, and the answer was no. There were nothing. There was none. So not only did we have the biggest COVID fraud case in the country, we had the only juror bribery case. And then I realized we would do what we would do that day and into the night and the days following. But I also had to start reporting up to the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General. When something like that happens, there's something called an urgent report that you have to make to the big bosses. And I did. And then we started a conversation with Washington. But what I'll close with on this is the folks who are finishing the trial. In all my years of trying long cases, 1 month, 2 month trials, the final day you collapse, you put everything aside, you put your feet up on the desk, you take a nap, you go home, you don't talk to anybody, you get away. And they weren't allowed to do that. The agents, the prosecutors, everybody stayed in that same room and now turned to investigating that case.
Remarkable. Let's get one more break in. We got one more segment with former U.S. Attorney Andy Luger. We're going to find out what he's going to do next. I've got a couple of texts I want to include in the discussion as well. And then we'll talk some hockey with Russo Radio about 4:35 or so.
Wolves. If you want to chime in what's happening with your favorite KFAN shows, you can make your voice heard on the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. Just let us know what you have to say by texting your message to 64686. That is 64686. Standard text message and data rate supply.
Former U.S. Attorney Andy Luger is with us for one more segment. We definitely appreciate your time. So what is next? You've been out of this particular position for about a month now. I know. I got to believe there's a big announcement coming. So what's it going to be?
Well, I'm going to go into private practice. I'm going to go to a law firm. Here's the thing. It's hard to leave a job that you were so dedicated to. And I had this amazing leadership team of people who were cranking out the work and creative and smart and doing these big cases. And I wanted to be there with them. And I wanted to continue to lead them, but also be inspired by them. And that didn't happen, so I've got to recalibrate. One of the things that I want to do, because I led this violent crime subcommittee and I worked with 35 U.S. attorneys around the country on violent crime, most of whom are Democrats like me. I've been a Democrat my whole life. And talk about how people in the Democratic Party talk about crime. Because I think, Democrats get a bad rap for their approach to violent crime. Maybe some of that is due. Maybe some of that is genuine. But it shouldn't be. I mean, crime to me is not a political football. It shouldn't be. People are against crime regardless, and victims of crime are against crime. There is no lobby for crime. And so why can't Democrats come out more clearly and forcefully on issues like violent crime and large-scale fraud?
And why can't they? I mean, part of a lot of the questions that have come in today, and I already had this down on my list anyway, is all the stuff you've laid out during your tenure, the second time around. Why you? Why not the state? Why couldn't there have been, more declarations and not? Well, that cheapens it because you did more than declare. We went out and did the work, which was the point. The Attorney General's office. Why were you able to articulate I think, a rage that did transcend left or right, Democrats or Republicans. You told me just the other day the number of individuals, community leaders, that over a period of time have gotten in touch with you and said, this is exactly what we need. Forget the noise out there. This is what we need. Why has it been so difficult for other Democrats in this state to be this declarative on this issue?
I don't know. I think that, first of all, the state attorney general's office is different. We have a state attorney general's office that isn't well poised to do a lot of criminal work. Some states do. It's more consumer protection, other kinds of work at the attorney general's office. So one could create more of a criminal operation there, and I think they're doing that and have done it. But mostly what they do is help out county attorneys, particularly in places with a small county attorney's office. I think Democrats in general, I think a script got flipped somewhere along the line. I became a Democrat, when I was a kid, because I like to look out for the little guy, and I hated bullies and I hated cheaters, and I could, talk about the psychology of all that. I hated people who didn't follow the rules and who bullied their way. And that's criminals. Criminals do that. So when I got to the point where I was going to go to law school, it made sense that I would want to be a criminal prosecutor and address crime, both violent crime and fraud and other, crimes against children, you name it. Somewhere along the line, the notion of the criminal defendants being the little guy, and they are, and I get that argument, but that became that overcame the notion of victims and communities. If you're a liberal or a conservative, you want people to be able to live safely. Whatever your vision of how society should operate, whether it's from a criminal, a conservative lens or a liberal lens or somewhere in between, it always starts with people being able to do what they want to do, unhindered by crime, by fraud, by being cheated. That interferes with your vision. So we ought to have a common vision of taking on crime. I think I articulated one that people could rally around. I'd like to see that continue, but I'd like to talk to Democrats around the country about how to do it, because it isn't that complicated. It's really common sense.
I mentioned a text I got earlier from an unnamed source. So the story, just by coincidence, breaks today that Tina Smith says that she will not run for re-election in the U.S. Senate, the junior senator, of course, from Minnesota. And in reaction to that news and knowing that you were going to be on this program today, I got this from a source. Andy Luger for U.S. Senate. He checks all the boxes. Among the first to uncover Stop ISIS Recruitment, Jacob Wetterling, a story, investigated huge fraud, stepped in to stop carjackings when the state couldn't, arrested top gang members, put in jail. So this is as good an opportunity as you'll have to declare that is at the very least something you would consider or are considering.
I'm really not. Thank you, by the way. And thank you to the person who texted. That's very nice to hear. I don't have a desire to run for office. I have a desire to continue this conversation on crime in an independent way. I didn't know we would talk about that today. I assumed we would talk about the Dylan movie, which we have, and the upcoming Springsteen movie. But I, in all seriousness, I think there are a lot of people who can articulate these things and can get a lot done. I'd rather do it outside of the electoral system.
Is that unchangeable, you think?
I don't know. I haven't really given it any thought, Dan. I'm just.
That's the political answer. That's what some people say. Well, he's kind of leaving the door open.
I'm not leaving doors open. Okay. I'm not about.
Well, but here it's going to sound like I'm trying to play up to you a little bit. Yeah. But in all honesty, without taking a position, there aren't a lot of. Let's face it. This is metropolitan area is obviously Democratic run, and very dominated by the DFL. But there aren't a lot of other Democrats who speak like you on this now. And there may be a million reasons for it, but there aren't. And my gut tells me that the centrists who are listening to this program, maybe even lean right, would say, well, that's a guy on this subject, at least, that I can listen to. Not just because of what you say, but because during your administration, what you did, because we would get the same thing. We get texts from people saying, man, we like what's being done here because, as you say, nobody wins in chaos, no matter where you are politically, if you day to day are living in fear of what's going on in your community.
So I agree with that, and I think I'll do what I can from the private world, Dan. Doors, I'm not, I don't know, I'm not opening or closing. Okay. That's not what I want to do.
Okay, that's fair enough. That leaves it open a little bit, in my view. But I'm a media person, so that's the way I'm going to look at it. Let me ask you a more general political question that doesn't have to do with whether you would run. How do we thread the needle on what I sort of view as to me the cycle we're in now is, well, when I'm talking about as a party. Speaking as a party, I'm out of office. I feel like I'm getting pounded and destroyed and flattened. So if I ever get in power, I'm going to exact revenge. I'm going to pound away. And I'm going to I'm not only just going to correct what I view as the wrong, I'm going to overcorrect. I feel like we're in a period in our history politically where it's all about overcorrecting whatever had happened before. And I think, again, a lot of us in the middle all feel like we suffer in that environment. How do we get past that?
Well, why not run a campaign that says, here's what I'm going to do. And what I'm going to do is going to appeal to a broad cross-section of people, not a narrow group of people. I'm going to do the following things that I think people generally want. And I'm not going to demagogue the other folks for what they did. I have friends across the political spectrum and across the ideological spectrum. And because they're my friends, they're all good people. And they believe different things about how to make the world better. But as long as you're trying to make the world better, if I don't agree with you, maybe I'm wrong. But most importantly, we all, going to a football analogy, most of us are playing between the 40s or maybe it's the 30s.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, in that range, yeah.
And so let's talk about that. And let's talk about a positive vision for what I'm going to do, not a horrible vision about what the other guy did.
Is
that's naive? I understand that people somebody's going to text me and say Luger's naive, which is great. I'm not, but that to me is really what I want to hear from anybody, left or right.
All right, let me see if I can get to a couple other quick texts here from folks. Because so far, this is unusual here because I haven't really found anybody who is criticizing you, which is rare. Because usually you get, it's probably a good problem.
I'm okay with that.
You're okay with that?
For now.
This is from 651 guy. I'm conservative, but he would have my vote 100%. This is to you directly. Andy, as a former police officer, I can tell you the Dem approach to crime. He may have done a text, or he may have done a voice text because I can't read it. It sounds like it's something to the effect of too many criminals are let go to then reoffend. That's what he is saying seems to distinguish you. How do you feel about that particular issue? Because we hear that a lot, and we hear that a lot about, again, bail. Now, as you mentioned, the federal situation, that gave you a lot more teeth and a lot more power, but that's another issue. We've even had cases within metro area where a couple of long-standing judges have basically done things they said they've never done in their career, which was, I'm not accepting this settlement because it's dangerous. So in the pendulum thing, has it swung too far beyond the federal level, state level, local level, whatever?
Well, it's far more complex at the state level than it is at the federal level, because the question then becomes, do we have enough probation officers? Do we have enough judges? Do we have enough time? There are so many defendants cycling through at the state level, and that's not just Minnesota, but elsewhere, that has to be addressed. If we really want to give ourselves the opportunity to incarcerate more people and have them kept behind bars, there's a whole lot that needs to happen to buttress the system. That's number one. On the federal level, I will tell you that there were U.S. attorneys appointed by President Biden and worked under Merrick Garland around the country who were doing a lot of what I was doing. And so we can say that I'm somewhat different from Minnesota, but I'm not that different from Philadelphia, from St. Louis, from elsewhere. People were doing the same work, re-indicting those who have had multiple offenses, et cetera. And the gang RICO stuff spread like wildfire. after we got going. People were doing it all over the country.
Let me see if I can find, I had one or two more texts. They're coming in so fast. I'm having a hard time keeping up with all of them as we wrap things up here with former U.S. Attorney Andy Luger. There are a couple folks who've texted the question, okay, when some of the crime is youth related, like we said, adolescents, kids, whatever. I assume it'd probably take another hour to answer the question completely, but what's the answer there? What's even, give us a couple clues as to how we get better.
So I would suggest you get Police Chief Brian O'Hara on the show. Brian knows this stuff far better than I do. And I think he's fantastic, by the way. I think he's exactly what we needed in Minneapolis. You need more facilities, places to house and to work with these kids, we call them. You need more. I mean, frankly, all these prosecutors' offices need to grow. All the defense offices need to grow because you need to build the infrastructure. It's, a lot of people say this to me all the time. Why can't we just do X? Well, we need the bodies. We need the support staff. We need the probation officers. We need the facilities. It's a lot of money. And where's that going to come from? I'm not an expert in that. I don't pretend to be. But that's a longer conversation than just sort of a bumper sticker or a short answer. And I don't want to do it disservice.
The biggest challenge, in your opinion, of the next U.S. attorney?
So I perceive, and it'll be interesting to see what happens, I perceive the problem being one of resources. We're hearing every day, sometimes every hour, about downsizing government. And it's at the FBI, it's elsewhere, and it could be at the U.S. Attorney's Office also. They're talking about reducing the sizes of U.S. Attorney's offices at the exact same time, increasing prosecution of illegal immigration cases. And that's fine, and that's I have no problem generally with that. But one of the things you do as a U.S. attorney is direct your resources. I put everything I could behind violent crime and then the feeding our future in the large-scale frauds. And I redirected our resources, same thing with law enforcement. I don't know how that's going to work going forward. There's more gang work to be done. There's more violent crime work. I envision 2 more years of gang RICO prosecutions, for example. I don't know if that's going to be possible. If we're directing, and I leave it to your listeners and others to decide what they want. We prosecuted 100 gang members, not one of which was an illegal immigrant. And I would suggest there are a lot more to do. I don't know how you're going to do that without growing the office, which was what I was hoping to do at a time where we're shrinking government. I just don't know, and I don't know if people have figured that out yet. But by the time a new U.S. attorney is confirmed, I'm hoping some of those questions are answered.
Next time we talk, I hope, then we'll get into detail. It sounds like you got a good story that you alluded to about while you're waiting to see if you're going to be approved. Sounds like there's a good backstory there, but we're against the clock here, unfortunately. Yeah. So we'll save that for next time. And lastly, maybe even more important than anything we talked about today, have you yet convinced, as a former offensive lineman, have you yet convinced the influential friends and people you know with the Minnesota Vikings that the meat and potatoes aspect of the line of scrimmage, offensive line and defensive line, as evidenced most recently by the Philadelphia Eagles, is everything?
I'm trying, Dan. This is part of my next phase. It was part of my last phase when I was in private practice. I don't understand it. I was an offensive lineman for 10 years. I played one position, offensive guard. And if you can't protect your quarterback and your running backs, nothing else matters. It seems that's pretty straightforward, just like attacking violent crime. I don't know why we can't do that better. I love our coach. I love our general manager. I think we got the right combination of people. I think we need the 350-pound guys. We need a lot of them. We need them up front, and we need to protect whoever's behind the center.
Enjoyed the conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to come in, and I hope we can do it again.
Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Andy Luger, former U.S. attorney, kind enough to join us for the last hour. We'll talk hockey. We'll check in with Russo Radio. That is next.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Don't miss out. One OK Rock is storming the Armory with their high-voltage performance. Be there for an epic night of rock June 7th with special guest Stand Atlantic. Check out our contest page to see how you can win your way in, KFAN.com. Keyword contest center.
Running a little bit late today. We apologize to our next guest, Russo Radio, kind enough to join us. Dateline, you're Montreal guy, right? Are you walking right now to the arena?
No, I'm going to leave right after I'm done. I'm actually on the 37th floor of my hotel staring at these incredible penthouses that I wish I could live in.
Sounds like a hell of a view.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I don't know the last time you were in Montreal.
Been a while.
It's a gorgeous city. And I'll tell you, we've had a blizzard, starting last night and all day today, and it's just beautiful out right now. Just looking at the snow on the ground, and I don't know. It's just there's something about the city.
They call it.
Really excited to be here. Last night was an absolute treat to cover that game, and made me really look forward to the rest of this tournament.
We'll get to that in a minute. I'm looking at a headline of an athletic piece, and you linked to it via your Twitter. Has U.S. hockey caught Canada? Why the Americans are no longer the underdog? Tell me about that.
Well, yeah, I didn't write the story.
Yep.
A couple of our other writers did, but there's no doubt that USA Hockey has I think caught up and surpassed Canada in many different levels, many different ways, and now this best on best tournament is sort of the last one to show that they can actually do it with NHL talent. Now, the one problem is, as deep as the Americans are, you're still going up probably against the four best players in the NHL. And I include Sidney Crosby in that. But McDavid, McKinnon, and McCarr are just absolutely as elite at what they do. So, you could play better, and these guys could still figure out a way to beat you. So, it's just the one thing about the United States, and the amount of players that are registered at all levels is that this has become a total, not just a global sport, but in the United States, and we're talking hockey players from multiple areas, no longer just the Michigans, the Minnesotas, the Massachusetts. We have so many players now coming from Texas, California, Arizona, Florida, and it's just going to continue to grow. And I was talking to somebody yesterday about in a couple of years, the number of players that are going to be coming out of California alone, just because of the hockey that is going on there in both San Diego and LA, and up in San Francisco, San Jose area, it's just absolutely exploding right now. So it's just going to continue to grow. But the best on best is something that Canada has absolutely dominated since the Vancouver Olympics, and especially with Sidney Crosby in their uniform, they've just continued to win and win and win. And last night was another example where even when they got put on the ropes there in the second and third periods in a game that they should have easily had in hand, they figure out a way in overtime to get it done.
More on that game in a minute. What do we need to know about tonight's matchup?
Well, the one thing about Finland is that if at every level, but especially, in a best on best tournament, they just play a super structured defensive game. It can just frustrate the heck out of you. Now, the one difference in this tournament is they've lost so many different defensemen here, 3 guys in the last couple of weeks, and it just felt like, there are guys on their blue line that are in the NHL that you barely have heard of. So this should be a game that the United States win handily, but Finland always finds a way to get it done. They still have a lot of talent on their roster with guys like Rantanen and Aho and Granlund, and just up front they really could damage you if you give them chances. But this is a game that the United States really should win, I think, fairly easily. That's the hope, because Canada has an extra day to prepare for the big Saturday night game against the United States. And so you want to get out of this game, one, obviously injury free, but two, make sure that you don't really have to expend a ton of energy to get this thing done. And then this way you can have a good day off tomorrow and get ready for Saturday night's game.
Connor McDavid, I think people maybe have this tournament confused for an all-star game. It is not an all-star game. This is a competitive event. Everyone wants to win, and you saw that tonight, as in last night. I think a lot of people knew that going in, but to see it vividly play out that way, it was a pretty clear reminder that this ain't another, whatever this is, this ain't another exhibition.
Yeah, well, McKinnon almost sent Eriksson Ek into Quebec City the other, within seconds of the game the other night. I think we all knew that this was not a glorified All-Star game. I mean, the pace the other night, all the players said after the game, it's the fastest they've ever been a part of. It was extremely physical. And obviously, in Shea Theodore's case, unfortunately, it cost him a serious injury, and he's going to be out of Vegas's lineup for a while. But that's the one thing that was so obvious at Monday's practice. The practices are intense, and when you get the prideful nature of all these professionals in a situation like this, when they've been begging to get back to best on best for the last 9 years, you just knew that they were going to come out and show up and play and play for all keeps. This is there's something about putting your country on your sweater. And just the pride that it has to represent your country, and you just see it with these guys. They want to win this thing, and this is definitely a precursor for the Olympics. And I was talking to Charlie McAvoy the other day, and he said the exact same thing to me, that that he cannot believe that people thought that this would be a glorified All-Star game, that every single player on every single team wants to win and win it all, and will do whatever it takes to win.
I was talking to Louis about the event itself, and nobody's more pro hockey than Louis, but he said I'm queasy about it because of the timing. I think it's late, and I'm worried about injury too, and that in his mind, he's not sure this makes a hell of a lot of sense. Now, that's different from then sitting down and watching and going, God, this is kind of fun, right? This is kind of a big deal as we're playing it out. It's intense. It's entertaining. This ain't like an all-star game that have been turned into, kind of a joke in several sports. So where are you on that whole issue of whether, even if it's exciting, even if it's competitive, whether it makes any sense?
Well, I still would love to see these things played in September. I think that's the way it was done in 2005 when I covered that World Cup, and I thought it was fabulous hockey. Unfortunately, that the day it ended, the next day it started the lockout. But I think that's the best time to have it. The problem is you are going head to head with football, where right now, for the most part, it is hockey, and everybody's paying attention. The Olympics are on the same schedule. Next year, the league will shut down for even longer and go there. So that's the risk that the owners are taking by allowing this event to be taking place in February. The difference with this one, as Louis was alluding to, is that this is a made-up tournament. This is a way to grow revenues. Yeah. It's not true best on best because obviously Russia is not involved. There are incredible hockey players from Germany like Leon Draisaitl, could be the MVP of the league. He's not in this. Andrei Kopitar. There's just over and over again. A bunch of incredible Czechs and Slovaks that aren't able to be in this tournament. So it's not a true World Cup. It's not a true Olympics. It's sort of this made up, and it's a tournament with no past and no future. This will never happen again. Right. The NHL announced a 2028 World Cup yesterday, and the goal is, and they're committed to the next two Olympics in both 26 and 2030, and then the goal is to eventually have World Cup Olympics every 2 years for the rest of time. So this tournament will never happen again, especially because the hope is eventually Russia will get back into a best on best tournament once the political climate obviously stabilizes. And but that's always the concern. And I know that every GM and every owner out there and every fan out there just holds their breath with every hit there. I mean, Eriksson Ek was crushed twice last night, and you're just hoping, all right, get up, because the Wild, in a week, whether if Sweden wins it or not, nobody's going to care about that if Eriksson Ek is out for several weeks with the Wild, and unfortunately that happened in Vegas yesterday with Shea Theodore, and this is a great defenseman who has had a great career, but this year has been his best season of his career. And even if, Vegas is going to get to use their LTI magic that they always seem to be able to pull off this time of year and pull off some great trade because he is potentially out for the rest of the year, who knows? It's still an unbelievable defenseman that's out of their lineup that really hurts them.
How good was Gustafsson last night?
He was unbelievable. I was talking to Johan Garpenlov this morning. Obviously, Sweden management, and actually covered him many eons ago, 26, 25 years ago in Florida. And he just went on and on that if Gustafsson wasn't as good as he was last night, that game would have ended in regulation, let alone get to overtime. He had made the unbelievable save on Devontae, so then in overtime for him to stop McKinnon 4 times, and then point blank chances by Makar, Marner, and Braden Point. I just thought he was sensational. It's a shame what happened on the last goal. It really felt like Sweden's coach did everything humanly possible not to play Erik Karlsson to overtime because of how much of a liability he can be defensively. But it gets to the point for some reason, he wasn't playing Brodin. He was just playing essentially Victor Hedman and Gus Forsling every other shift. Well, they were absolutely gassed. So he gives Erik Karlsson a rare shift, and he's out there for 14 seconds. Horrendous gap. Backed himself into a screen and a goal. So I know some people were blaming Gustafsson on the goal. It's an unbelievable shot, but to me, that was Erik Karlsson all day long screwing up defensively. And so it was a shame, but he got them a point. And Canada essentially lost a point by not winning in regulation because they're doing the 3-2-1 format. And, if the United States wins in regulation against Canada on Saturday night, Canada is going to have a lot of stress on them because they will definitely no longer, if Sweden essentially could win their next couple, they'll no longer really control their own destiny. So there's a nuclear option that really Canada can finish with 5 points and not get to the championship game.
What's the atmosphere like in the arena?
Oh my God. I mean, it's just, there's nothing like covering a game at Bell Center, even during the regular season. And last night was just spine tingling all game long. They bring it all game long. It started with the pregame ceremony of bringing out guys like Daniel Alfredson, Timo Solani, Mike Richter, and Mario Lemieux. When Mario came out there and everybody was chanting Mario, 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 it was just, just goosebumps. And then Crosby goes over there. He gets even a louder ovation. And in overtime, it was strange. Like John Cooper, he played Crosby the second shift. And then I even tweeted right before the goal that Crosby hadn't been out there since that second shift. And so here we are, 4.5, 5 minutes later, and John Cooper throws Crosby on the ice, and the fans immediately start chanting Crosby, Crosby, Crosby. And boom, he does a neutral zone drop pass for a reload. Marner skates right into it, and he gets his third assist of the game. This is a guy that missed his last 4 games before this tournament. Crosby, he's still not 100%, and yet he comes here yesterday and still shows that he is, the heartbeat of Canada when it comes to hockey, even with all the greats that they have. And he was just sensational last night.
You're laying out exactly why I'm torn on this whole subject, because I am somebody who's so exasperated by all-star games and the exhibition-y nature of them and the farcical nature of them in almost every sport. And so I say, well, this is fun. This is competitive. This is cool. Even if you say, well, there's really not that much at stake. It's a made-up event. And you got on the other side of it, obviously, the injury concern. So I can understand general managers holding their breath. But as it's playing out, I'm going, well, this is kind of cool, right? This is something different to grab onto that has nothing to do with the nonsense at All-Star time.
Yeah, I get both sides. But even as cynical as you are before this tournament starts, and God knows I was. I mean, if you listen to my podcast, I kind of talked for the last 2 or 3 weeks that I was not the most excited to have to cover this event because it felt like also empty words. That you're trying to build up something that really means nothing. But then last night in overtime, you're seeing Crosby, you're seeing, Makar, McKinnon, and McDavid on the ice together, and you're like, holy moly. I mean, this is not an all-star game. First minute of the game, William Nylander takes an absolutely horrific, stupid penalty. And 12 seconds into that power play, McDavid to Crosby to McKinnon for a goal. And you're just like, this truly is unreal. And so, I get both sides because this event is totally, like I said, no past, no future. It's an invented tournament. But once the puck dropped on the tournament, you saw how serious the players were taking it and how the fans were there to to watch something truly special. You just got to almost in your own mind imagine it that this is just a World Cup, and we all accept World Cup of hockey. We all, 96 was the pinnacle for USA hockey. That was sort of the beginning after, of this, country really showing that they were on par with some of the great nations. The Bill Guerins and the Mike Modano's and all that. So just, consider it that. And we'll see. I mean, Bill Guerin is the mastermind, has his fingerprints all over this USA roster tonight. We've been talking about it for a year of what he was going to do to create this team. He made some real questionable or controversial or debatable decisions by leaving some really good players off for guys that are not having good years in their National Hockey League uniforms. And now tonight we're going to see them unveiled for the first time after seeing Canada yesterday. And I bet last night was an eye-opener for a lot of these Americans that the pace of play here is going to be absolutely unbelievable, and they better come ready to play from the drop of the puck.
Now, last item, Russo Radio joining us from Montreal. Is there anything you have learned or gleaned to think that Kaprizov is not on schedule? In other words, we don't see any signs early of complications. Mm-hmm. All things are good, or is it hard to get a read on any of that right now?
Well, Bill Guerin was on Beyond the Pond last week with Fallness and Micheletti, and he had a line that said, "We hope that he comes back this year." And I sent him a text, and I said to him, I'm like, that sounded ominous, is it? And he kind of gave me we don't know. So I asked a couple people, not Bill Guerin, that are affiliated with Wild that are here in Montreal about that. And they said, no, there's not been any setbacks. It's just one of those things that they just, until he gets on the ice and starts skating, you just don't know. And so the timetable hasn't changed, but, will it be 4 weeks? I don't know. 4 weeks from surgery. And they, and it really has them in this sort of holding pattern because as you and I have talked about a bunch of times, at March 7th, he'd like to make some trades. They are absolutely, unless they have a season-ending injury by somebody, they are incapable of making trades. Unless they get insanely creative or they get guys to waive their no move, which I don't anticipate, or he can find takers for guys that make money that he's got to ship out. So, I think that's going to be the biggest thing is if all of a sudden they get to March 7th and Kaprizov is actually 2 or 3 weeks off or, even a month off, then do you make the decision, all right, you know what, let's keep him out to the playoffs. The problem is, they have some games before March 7 that they got to continue to win. This is not, even though the Wild are 90-something% to make the playoffs, it's not a lot. They can, without Kaprizov, I mean, you could easily fall out of it. So I don't think that this is the type of thing that you can play games with Kaprizov and keep him out if he's ready to play just to try to make a big trade because we all know that the way that this team is going to make the playoffs most likely would be with Kaprizov in the lineup. So to answer your question, I don't think there's been any setbacks, but I do think the timetable, even though they said minimum 4 weeks,
yeah.
I don't think that anybody's 100% on exactly when Kaprizov will be back.
Have fun tonight. We'll read you later tonight or tomorrow as well, and we'll chat soon. Thanks, Russo.
Yep. See you, Dan. Take care.
That is Russo Radio Dateline Montreal. U.S. playing Finland, I believe, this evening as this, one-of-a-kind sort of tournament indeed continues. We're a little late for the top five because I do want to get back to this particular tournament with our hockey guy, Brett Blakemore. We'll have time to do that because the rest of the show, I believe we are guest-free. What do you have for top five purposes?
I will actually file a Target Center report.